In this episode, we discuss a big problem that is happening in society and actually nobody's talking about. And that is that people do not have their skin in the game. And what I mean by that is that the person who spends the money is not the same as the person who earned the money. Hello and welcome back. This is Andrei, and in this episode we talk about a problem that I believe is one of the largest problems happening in society, and that is people do not have their skin in the game. And in this video I want to explain clearly what is this problem about. Then I want to share some examples about how this problem manifests in society, and then talk about what do we need to do about it? Like, what is the actual actionable point that we need to care when we think about this problem? And let's start with defining the actual problem of people not having their skin in the game. And that is that the person who spends the money is not the same as the person who earned the money. Now, everybody knows that when you spend your own money, it's different than when you spend other people's money. In the sense, it's the efficiency which kicks in. And when you spend your own money, you have the best interest of spending it well. But when other people spend other people's money, then this interest does not exist. If you spend other person's money, you do not get any of the upside or the downside of spending that money well. Now, we can be idealistic and say that, starting from a common good feeling, people have their interest of spending other people's money well. But if we look at society, I thought this way in the past that people have good intentions. But if you look at society, people do not many times have good intentions. And if you then realize that most of the money in society is spent by people different than those who earn them, meaning people in the government didn't work a second for the money that they are spending. People in companies, like if it's not your company, you essentially spend other people's money. People in non-profits, people in other organizations, like pick the director of any school, of any investment fund at the end of the day. Like, it's not your money at the end of the day. Or even if you look at the banks that make big investments, and at everything almost that you look, except you as an individual, meaning us individuals, there is a different person who spends the money than those who earn the money. And this is a big problem. Like, it's just a big problem. And let's see how this manifests. Haven't you heard of politicians, people, directors taking bribes in order to do a specific acquisition? Meaning, this individual have specific needs. For example, they need to build a highway, they need to build a hospital. These are good intentions. But you might want to buy specific light bulbs in the city. Now, the person, in this case a politician, is just not incentivized to spend the money well. They need to spend it, meaning they need to make a specific acquisition, but the way they spend it, there is not such a metric of how well you spend it. And this is a problem, because that person doesn't get any of the upside and the downside. And if they are incentivized just to spend it, then they need to have another incentive, like how there are many competing offers and you need to pick one. And some people go as far as, bribing those decision makers into making specific actions. This is something wrong, but we need to realize that it's happening in society because of the problem that people do not have their skin in the game. Like, if you would make an acquisition for you have no interest in taking a bribe because you want to make the best acquisition that you possibly can. But if you spend other people's money, then the temptation of getting a bribe kicks in, and this is a problem in society. And I think it's a big one. And in many cases, there are people who have tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they just need to spend them. So for example, if you are the, call it, director of acquisition in a hospital, then you are you just need to buy things. You need to buy beds, you need to buy medical equipment, you need to buy stuff. You just need to. And now the question is which one you buy, and it's not always the best that you could possibly buy because of these problems. And now let's look on the flip side, meaning things which happens in society in order to try to reduce this effect. And that is, I always wondered, why do companies give shares to their employees? Because at the end of the day, if you are that sure that your company is going to go well, like if the stock is always increasing and you make profit, why would you give the shares away? Like, why wouldn't you keep all those shares for you? And there are many reasons, but one of them, and it's an important one, is that you want the employees to have their skin in the game. Like, you want to align the incentive of them doing something good with the incentive of the company doing well. You essentially align these incentives of company goes well, you do well, because in this way you essentially motivate them, you force them, put it this way, to just take good actions for the company's interest, because it's also their good interest. And this is something important, and this is a thematic of a theme of questions that I do not yet have full answers, meaning how to align the good interest of society with the actual interest of all the individuals. Because at the end of the day, if all the common good in the world would be incentivized, if people would be incentivized to do the common good in the world would be in a much better place. But then we need to realize that that's not the case, because what is sometimes good for society is not necessarily good for you, or vice versa. So now we saw some examples like how this manifests, meaning people take suboptimal decisions because they do not have any incentive to pick the optimal one. And now let's see what's the actionable advice that we need to understand, what can we actually do about that. And the important first thing is to realize that this is an actual phenomenon in society. We need to understand that people do not make all the decisions at their optimal, rate. They just take suboptimal decisions. Until now, meaning until 1 or 2 years ago, I lived with the impression that people, have a good need in them of doing the right decision, but it's false. Some people have them, but many people, think just of themselves, and they do not have the feeling or the need to do the right thing. This is a problem, but we need to realize that. And then the second thing is that you do not need to be romantic about it, meaning you need to realize and take this as a fact that this is what's happening in society. People don't have their skin in the game. People take suboptimal decisions because they are not incentivized to do the right thing. And you need to acknowledge that, just pick it as a fact, and don't, try to live in an utopia and think that, oh, it's so bad because this and that is happening. I understand that we need to try to improve those things and we need to strive for better, but we also need to understand that this is what's happening in society. It's just the way it is. We need to strive for more, but this is the way it is now. And after you take this thing as a fact that it's happening in society and it's just the way it is, then you also need to understand how you can actually use this thing in your own advantage. Meaning, you need to understand, and this is the actual point, you need to understand what's the incentive for the other human being. Pick, for example, a government agency which gives funds for a specific reason, meaning grants. The actual interest of the human being reading that application, firstly, they just need to give the money away. It's a specific budget that they need to give away. And now the question is what to do to give them to you. And the reason is that you need to align your application with what the purpose of the grant application, but more specifically, like think of the actual specific incentive of that person. They want their job to be easy. They want to read a good application as quickly as possible. So one of the incentive of the other person is that they do not want to use much mental power. They want to read it as simple as possible. So what you need to understand is that you need to make the application as simple as possible. This is one of the incentives that they have. Like the incentive to use the money as best as possible is something very subjective. Like, why would they give you the grant and not to the other person? It's very subjective. But what you know for sure is that the other person, like one of the incentives that they have is for themselves, just get the job done quickly. Simple. Don't use the mental power, and you need on your side to make that application as simple as possible. Now, this is a more important conversation as a society as a whole. Like, this was practical advice for you, but like, what should happen in society in an ideal case? It should happen that the incentive for a good society should be aligned with the incentive that the individuals have. I'm still thinking of ways to make this alignment, and I don't have full reasons at the moment, but at least I realized that this is something what's happening in society, and I'm no longer romantic about it. And I encourage everyone to do the same. Just look at the world and try to see, facts which are happening in the world and take them as it is. We should try to eliminate the utopia from our head because it many times is bad, and realizing that people do not have their skin in the game is just a way of doing that. This is everything that I had to say in this video, but if you enjoyed it and you would like to get more of this type of videos, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to this channel. Like, if you remain until this point to watch this video, it means that you enjoyed it, and you should be looking to the next video which I am preparing. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.